The sun was just beginning to rise over the sprawling campus of the Intergalactic Academy, casting a golden glow across its futuristic architecture. Towering glass domes reflected the light like prisms, scattering rainbows onto the manicured lawns below. Students from countless worlds bustled about, their laughter and chatter filling the air as they made their way to class. Among them was Kale, a 17-year-old human boy with unruly brown hair and a backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. He wasn't anything special, just another student trying to keep up in a place where extraordinary was the norm. Kale had always dreamed of being here, though. Growing up on Earth, he'd been fascinated by stories of alien civilizations, strange ecosystems, and advanced technologies. His parents often teased him for spending more time reading about xenobiology than playing outside with his friends. But now, standing amidst beings who looked like they'd stepped straight out of those books, Kale felt both exhilarated and overwhelmed. Every day at the academy was a reminder that humanity was only one small piece of an unimaginably vast universe. As he walked toward his first class of the day, Kale couldn't help but notice the buzz rippling through the crowd. Whispers spread like wildfire, drawing his attention to a figure standing near the entrance of the main building. She, or at least he assumed it was a she based on her delicate frame, was unlike anyone he'd ever seen before. Her skin shimmered faintly, catching the sunlight in a way that reminded him of polished silver. Tiny markings glowed softly along her arms and neck, shifting colors subtly with every movement she made. Her eyes were large and luminous, reflecting the world around her with an almost ethereal clarity. "That's Lyra," said a voice beside him, startling Kale out of his thoughts. He turned to see Mira, one of his classmates, grinning mischievously. "She's new. Arrived late last night, apparently." "Wow," Kale murmured, unable to take his eyes off the newcomer. "Where's she from?" Mira shrugged. "Some planet called Silvera. I heard they're super advanced. Telepaths or something. Can you imagine? Reading minds all the time." Kale shuddered involuntarily at the thought. "That sounds intense." "Yeah, well, good luck getting her to talk to you," Mira added with a smirk. "From what I've heard, Silverans are pretty reserved. Not exactly big fans of socializing." Sure enough, Lyra seemed content to observe rather than engage. She stood quietly, her gaze sweeping over the bustling courtyard with an unreadable expression. Occasionally, her glowing markings would flicker, as if responding to some unseen stimulus. Despite her calm demeanor, there was an undeniable aura of confidence about her, a quiet strength that set her apart from the chaos surrounding her. Curiosity got the better of Kale, and he found himself inching closer, hoping for a glimpse of something more. But when Lyra suddenly turned her head and locked eyes with him, he froze mid-step. For a brief moment, it felt as though she could see right through him, as though she knew every thought racing through his mind. Then, just as quickly, she looked away, leaving him flustered and unsure of what had just happened. Later that morning, during Professor Varn's lecture on interspecies diplomacy, Kale tried to focus on the material but kept finding his attention drifting back to Lyra. She sat a few rows ahead of him, perfectly still except for the occasional twitch of her fingers against the desk. Her presence was magnetic, drawing stares from nearly everyone in the room. Even the professor seemed intrigued, pausing mid-sentence to ask if she had any questions about the topic. Lyra hesitated, her glowing markings dimming slightly before she spoke in a soft, melodic voice. "I understand the importance of cooperation between species," she began, her words carefully chosen. "But how do humans handle misunderstandings without the ability to communicate directly through thought?" The question caught Kale off guard. It was simple yet profound, highlighting a fundamental difference between their two species. Humans relied on language, tone, and body language to convey meaning, while Silverans apparently communicated telepathically. To Lyra, human interactions must have seemed impossibly convoluted. Professor Varn chuckled warmly. "Ah, excellent question. Humans have developed countless tools and techniques to bridge those gaps, everything from facial expressions to written texts. Sometimes, we even use technology to assist us. He gestured to a holographic display hovering above his podium. Still, misunderstandings happen frequently. That's why learning to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts, is so important. Lyra tilted her head slightly, as if processing this information. Her markings brightened momentarily, then returned to their usual soft glow. Kel watched her intently, marveling at how effortlessly she commanded the room's attention. Though she hadn't said much, her mere presence sparked curiosity and conversation among her peers. By the end of the day, rumors about Lyra were already swirling. Some students whispered that she could read emotions as easily as thoughts, while others claimed her glowing markings changed color depending on her mood. Cale didn't know which stories were true, but he couldn't deny the intrigue she inspired. There was something captivating about her, something that made him want to learn more. As he headed back to his dorm room that evening, Cale realized he'd spent most of the day thinking about Lyra. He wondered what it must be like to come from a world so different from his own, to navigate life surrounded by people who could hear your thoughts and feel your emotions. Did she find Earth strange, overwhelming, or was she simply biding her time until she could return home? Whatever the case, Cale decided then and there that he wanted to get to know her better. Maybe they could work together on a project or share insights about their respective cultures. After all, wasn't that the whole point of attending the Intergalactic Academy? To connect, to learn, and to grow. Little did Cale know, his chance meeting with Lyra would lead to far more than he ever anticipated. But for now, as he closed the door to his dorm room and settled into bed, he allowed himself a small smile. Tomorrow was a new day, and perhaps the start of something extraordinary. The next morning, Cale woke up with a strange sense of anticipation. He wasn't sure why Lyra had captured his attention so completely. Perhaps it was her quiet confidence or the mystery surrounding her, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. As he got ready for class, he decided to make an effort to talk to her. After all, they were in the same program, and chances were high they'd cross paths again. When Cale arrived at Professor Varn's classroom, Lyra was already seated near the front, her glowing markings dim but steady. She seemed absorbed in a datapad, occasionally tapping its surface with slender fingers. Taking a deep breath, Cale approached her cautiously, unsure of how to begin. Hi," he said finally, his voice quieter than he intended. Lyra looked up, her luminous eyes meeting his. For a moment, Cale felt as though she could see straight into his soul. Then, after a brief pause, she nodded politely. "Hello, I'm Cale," he continued, forcing a smile. "We're in the same xenobiology class." "Yes," Lyra replied simply, her tone neutral. "I remember." Cale scratched the back of his neck nervously. Conversations weren't usually this difficult for him, but something about Lyra made him feel like every word needed to be carefully chosen. "So, where are you from again?" "Silvara, right." She inclined her head slightly. "Correct. It is my homeworld." "Must be pretty different from here," Cale ventured, gesturing vaguely around the room. "I mean, Earth is kind of chaotic compared to what I've heard about your planet." Lyra studied him for a moment, her markings flickering faintly. "It is different," she admitted, "but not necessarily better or worse. Just unfamiliar." Her response left Cale unsure of how to continue. Before he could think of another question, Professor Varn entered the room, signaling the start of class. Relieved yet slightly disappointed, Cale returned to his seat, glancing back at Lyra once before focusing on the lecture. Later that afternoon, fate, or maybe coincidence, brought them together again. This time, it was during a group project session in the lab. The assignment was to design a prototype device capable of translating nonverbal cues between species, and students were divided into pairs based on their strengths. To Cale's surprise and mild panic, he found himself paired with Lyra. "Looks like we're working together," he said awkwardly as they claimed a workstation near the back of the room. A tray of glowing blue liquid sat waiting on the counter, along with various tools and materials. Lyra gave him a measured look. Very well. For the first few minutes, neither of them spoke much. Cale fiddled with the equipment while Lyra examined the instructions on their shared holoscreen. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Cale cleared his throat. "So, do you have any ideas for how we should approach this?" Lyra hesitated, then pointed to the blue liquid. "This substance reacts to emotional stimuli. Perhaps we can use it as a base for detecting changes in mood." "That's smart," Cale said, impressed despite himself. "But how do we measure those changes accurately? Like, humans express emotions differently depending on context. Sometimes smiling means, but other times it's just polite." Lyra tilted her head thoughtfully. "On Silvera, emotions are expressed through light patterns. They cannot be concealed easily." Her markings flared briefly, as if to emphasize her point. "Your species seems complicated." Cale chuckled. "Yeah, tell me about it. Even humans don't always understand each other half the time." They spent the next hour brainstorming ideas, their dynamics slowly shifting from stiff formality to cautious collaboration. Cale discovered that Lyra was surprisingly insightful, offering perspectives he'd never considered. Meanwhile, Lyra appeared intrigued by Cale's creativity and willingness to experiment, even if some of his suggestions bordered on absurd. At one point, Cale accidentally spilled the glowing blue liquid all over their notes. Panicking, he grabbed a cloth to clean it up, only making matters worse by smearing the substance across the table. "Oh no, oh no," he muttered under his breath, frantically trying to salvage their work. To his astonishment, Lyra didn't react with frustration or annoyance. Instead, she raised her hand, and the liquid began lifting off the surface as if guided by an invisible force. Cale stared, wide-eyed, as she used her telekinetic powers to neatly deposit the spill back into its container. "Whoa," he breathed. "That's amazing." Lyra's markings brightened slightly, betraying a hint of pride. "Basic skill where I come from." "Well, it's incredible to me," Cale said honestly. "Thanks for saving us." For the first time since they'd met, Lyra smiled, a small, almost imperceptible curve of her lips, but it was enough to make Cale grin in return. In that moment, the awkwardness between them faded, replaced by a tentative camaraderie. Over the following days, Cale and Lyra continued working on their project, gradually growing more comfortable with each other. Their partnership became a blend of trial and error, laughter, and occasional frustration. One particularly chaotic session involved Cale attempting to demonstrate human body language using exaggerated gestures, which only succeeded in confusing Lyra further. "Why do you move your hands so much when you speak?" she asked, tilting her head curiously. "It's called emphasis," Cale explained, waving his arms dramatically. "You know, to show passion or excitement." Lyra blinked. "Passion? Yeah, like, Cale struggled to find an example. "Like when you really care about something." Her markings shifted, pulsing softly. "I see. Fascinating." Another time, Lyra tried teaching Cale basic silver and customs, such as how to interpret light patterns. She demonstrated by projecting faint glows onto her skin, explaining what each color represented. Red meant anger, green signified calmness, and purple indicated curiosity. When Cale jokingly asked what yellow meant, Lyra hesitated before admitting it symbolized embarrassment. "You get embarrassed," Cale teased, raising an eyebrow. "Rarely," Lyra replied coolly, though her markings briefly flashed yellow. Their interactions weren't without challenges, of course. Misunderstandings still arose, especially when cultural differences clashed. Once, Cale extended his hand for a handshake, only for Lyra to stare at it blankly. Realizing his mistake, he quickly withdrew it, muttering an apology. "Sorry, I forgot. Not everyone does that." "It is fine," Lyra assured him, though her markings dimmed slightly. "I am learning too." Despite these hiccups, their bond strengthened with each passing day. Kale appreciated Lyra's patience and intelligence, while Lyra found herself intrigued by Kale's humor and determination. Together, they made progress on their project, combining human ingenuity with silver and precision to create something truly unique. By the end of the week, their prototype, a sleek wristband capable of interpreting both verbal and nonverbal cues, was nearly complete. As they tested it for the final time, Kale couldn't help but feel proud of what they'd accomplished. "This turned out great," he said, grinning at Lyra. "We make a pretty good team." Lyra nodded, her markings glowing steadily. "Indeed. Thank you for your efforts, Kale." "No problem," he replied, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. "Hey, maybe we should celebrate once we finish. You know, grab some snacks or something." Lyra tilted her head. "Snacks? Yeah. Food is kind of a big deal on Earth. Want to try some?" After a moment's hesitation, Lyra agreed. "Very well. But I warn you, I may not enjoy it." Kale laughed. "That's okay. Half the fun is trying new things, right?" As they packed up their materials, Kale realized how much he'd come to value their partnership. What had started as an awkward pairing had blossomed into something meaningful, a friendship built on mutual respect and shared discovery. And though he still had much to learn about Lyra and her world, he looked forward to every step of the journey. Little did he know, their connection would soon be tested in ways neither of them could anticipate. But for now, as they walked out of the lab together, Kale allowed himself to savor the moment, a small victory in a vast, interconnected universe. The days passed quickly for Kale and Lyra as they continued working on their project. Their partnership had become a seamless blend of human ingenuity and silver and precision, and the prototype wristband was nearly ready for presentation. Despite their progress, Kale couldn't help but notice how much he enjoyed spending time with Lyra. Her quiet confidence and thoughtful insights intrigued him, and he found himself looking forward to their daily meetings. One evening, after another productive session in the lab, Kale decided it was time to head back to his dorm room. The academy's corridors were quieter now, the usual bustle replaced by the soft hum of energy-efficient lights. As he walked, he reflected on the day's events, particularly Lyra's reaction when he'd offered her a taste of Earth snacks earlier that afternoon. She'd wrinkled her nose at the salty chips but seemed genuinely curious about the chocolate bar he handed her, watching her cautiously nibble on it, and then promptly spit it out, had been both hilarious and endearing. By the time Kale reached his dorm building, he felt tired but satisfied. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, and tossed his backpack onto the desk. Glancing at the clock, he realized dinner would start soon. Deciding to freshen up before heading to the cafeteria, he grabbed a towel and headed into the small refresher unit attached to his room. Meanwhile, Lyra wandered aimlessly through the academy grounds, her mind preoccupied with thoughts of Kale. Over the past few weeks, she'd come to appreciate his enthusiasm and creativity. Humans were so different from Sylpharans, loud, emotional, and often unpredictable. But there was something undeniably charming about them. Kale, in particular, had a way of making even the most mundane tasks feel exciting. Lost in thought, Lyra failed to notice where she was going until she found herself standing in front of a familiar-looking door. It resembled her own dorm room entrance almost exactly, right down to the sleek metallic handle and glowing panel beside it. Assuming it was hers, she pushed the door open without hesitation. Inside, the room was dimly lit, its occupant nowhere in sight. Lyra frowned, puzzled. This didn't look quite like her space. The furniture arrangement was slightly different, and there was a distinct lack of glowing crystals she used to personalize her surroundings. Before she could retreat, however, the sound of movement caught her attention. Kale emerged from the refresher unit wearing nothing but a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. His hair was damp, water droplets clinging to his shoulders as he rubbed his face with the edge of the towel. At first, he didn't notice Lyra standing frozen just inside the doorway. When he finally looked up, his eyes widened in shock. "Lyra," he exclaimed, instinctively clutching the towel tighter around himself. "What are you doing here?" Lyra stood rooted to the spot, her bioluminescent markings flickering erratically. Of all the scenarios she might have imagined while entering what she believed to be her own room, this was far beyond anything her telepathic abilities could have prepared her for. Her cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, since Silverans didn't experience emotions in the same way humans did, but with an overwhelming sense of discomfort. I thought this was my room," she stammered, her voice unusually shaky. "The doors look identical." "Oh," Cale blinked, trying to process the situation. "Right. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll just..." He gestured vaguely toward the refresher unit, unsure of what else to say. For several seconds, neither of them moved. The air between them crackled with awkward tension. Finally, Lyra took a step backward, her markings still pulsing wildly. "I should leave." "No, wait," Cale called out, though his tone was gentle. "It's okay, really. Just give me a second. I'll grab some clothes, and we can figure this out." Lyra hesitated, torn between fleeing the scene and staying to resolve the misunderstanding. In the end, curiosity won out. She nodded stiffly, keeping her gaze fixed firmly on the floor as Cale hurriedly retrieved a pair of pants and a shirt from his dresser. Once dressed, he turned back to face her, offering an apologetic smile. "Sorry again," he said sheepishly. "That must have been weird for you." "It was unexpected," Lyra admitted, her markings finally settling into a steady glow. "On Silvera, privacy is highly valued. Entering someone's personal space without permission is considered disrespectful." Cale winced. "Yeah, I get that. And I'm really sorry if I made you uncomfortable. It's just, well, you walked in, and I wasn't expecting anyone, so..." "It is not your fault," Lyra interrupted softly. "I mistook your room for mine. I should have paid closer attention." They stood in silence for a moment, both acutely aware of how surreal the situation was. Then, to Cale's surprise, Lyra let out a faint chuckle. It was barely audible, more like a ripple of amusement than actual laughter, but it broke the tension instantly. "What?" Cale asked, grinning despite himself. "This is not how I expected our collaboration to proceed," Lyra replied, her markings shifting to a calm green hue. "But perhaps it will make an interesting story someday." Cale laughed nervously. "Yeah, maybe. Though I think I'd prefer to keep this part out of the history books." Lyra tilted her head, studying him curiously. "You humans have such strange customs. Even your reactions to unexpected situations are unique." "Well, I guess that's one way to put it," Cale said, scratching the back of his neck. "Anyway, are you sure you're okay? I don't want this to mess up our partnership or anything." "There is no harm done," Lyra assured him, "though I may need a moment to process what has occurred." "Fair enough," Cale agreed. "Hey, why don't we meet up later? Maybe grab some coffee or tea, or whatever you prefer, and talk about it. That way, we can clear the air properly." Lyra considered his suggestion for a moment before nodding. "Very well. I would appreciate that." Relieved, Cale smiled. "Great. I'll see you in a bit then." As Lyra left the room, closing the door gently behind her, Cale collapsed onto his bed with a groan. Well, that was mortifying, he muttered to himself. But deep down, he couldn't help feeling a twinge of amusement. Life at the Intergalactic Academy certainly kept things interesting. Later that evening, Cale met Lyra in the Academy's Common Lounge, a cozy space filled with plush seating and holographic displays. They chose a quiet corner away from the other students, each nursing a warm drink, coffee for Cale, herbal infusion for Lyra. "So," Cale began hesitantly, "how are you holding up?" Lyra sipped her drink thoughtfully. "Better than I anticipated. Your species' ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances is admirable." "That's one way to look at it," Cale said with a wry grin. "Honestly, I was worried you'd never want to work with me again after today. Why would I not? Lyra asked, tilting her head. Mistakes happen. What matters is how we address them. Kale nodded, grateful for her understanding. Still, I owe you an apology. You came here thinking it was your room, and instead you got, well, me. Lyra's markings flickered briefly, hinting at amusement. It is fortunate that Silverans do not attach significant meaning to nudity. Otherwise, this incident might have been far more problematic. Wait, really? Kale raised an eyebrow. You guys don't care about stuff like that. Not in the same way humans do, Lyra explained. Our culture places greater emphasis on mental privacy than physical exposure. However, I admit the experience was unusual. Unusual, Kale repeated, chuckling. That's one word for it. Their conversation flowed easily after that, transitioning from the mishap to lighter topics. Kale shared stories about his childhood on Earth, while Lyra described aspects of life on Silvera. By the time they parted ways, the awkwardness of earlier had faded completely, replaced by a renewed sense of camaraderie. As Kale returned to his dorm, he couldn't help but marvel at how much he'd learned about Lyra and himself in such a short time. Mistakes happened, yes, but sometimes those mistakes led to unexpected connections. And in a place like the Intergalactic Academy, where every day brought new challenges and opportunities, those connections were invaluable. Little did he know, their bond would continue to grow stronger in the weeks ahead, setting the stage for adventures neither of them could have foreseen. But for now, as he climbed into bed and closed his eyes, Kale allowed himself a small smile. Tomorrow was a new day, and one he was eager to face alongside Lyra. The next morning, Kale woke up feeling lighter than he had in days. The awkwardness of the previous evening's mishap had faded, replaced by a newfound sense of connection with Lyra. Their conversation in the common lounge had been surprisingly candid, and for the first time, Kale felt like he was truly beginning to understand her, not just as a brilliant partner, but as a person navigating an unfamiliar world. As he got ready for class, Kale couldn't help replaying snippets of their talk in his mind. Lyra's explanation about Silveran attitudes toward nudity had been eye-opening, reminding him how much cultural differences shaped perceptions. He realized that what might seem embarrassing or mortifying to him could mean something entirely different, or even nothing at all, to someone else. It was humbling, really, to think about how vast those gaps were, and, yet, somehow, they'd managed to bridge them. When Kale arrived at their usual lab, Lyra was already there, her glowing markings steady and calm. She glanced up as he entered, offering a small nod. "Good morning." "Morning," Kale replied, smiling warmly. "How are you holding up after yesterday?" Lyra hesitated, then gave a slight shrug. "I am adjusting. Your species' reactions to privacy breaches are intriguing." Kale chuckled. "Yeah, well, I guess humans value personal space a lot. But hey, no hard feelings, right?" "No hard feelings," Lyra confirmed, her markings shifting to a soft green hue. "In fact, I believe the experience has helped me better understand your perspective." "That's great to hear," Kale said sincerely. "And honestly, it's helping me understand yours too. Like, I never thought about how Silverans prioritize mental privacy over physical exposure. It makes total sense now." Lyra tilted her head curiously. "You find it logical?" "Well, yeah," Kale replied. "I mean, if you can read thoughts, then protecting your mind would be way more important than covering your body, right? It's just different priorities." Her markings brightened slightly, betraying a hint of satisfaction. "Precisely. Perspective is often shaped by necessity." Their discussion naturally segged into work on their prototype wristband. With the device nearly complete, they focused on final adjustments, testing its ability to interpret both verbal cues and nonverbal signals like posture, facial expressions, and even subtle changes in tone. As they worked, their conversations grew more fluid, weaving seamlessly between technical details and personal reflections. At one point, Kale asked, "So, what do you miss most about Silvera?" Lyra paused, her fingers hovering over the holoscreen. After a moment, she said, "The light." "The light?" Kale echoed, intrigued. "Yes. On Silvera, our cities are illuminated not by artificial sources, but by natural bioluminescence. Plants, animals, even the ground itself glows softly at night. It creates harmony." Kale imagined it, a world bathed in gentle, living light, and felt a pang of awe. "That sounds incredible. Must feel strange being here, surrounded by so much darkness." "It does," Lyra admitted. "But I also find beauty in Earth's stars. They remind me of home, though they are distant and cold." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. Sometimes, when I'm missing Earth, I look up at the sky and try to pick out constellations. It helps." Lyra studied him, her luminous eyes reflecting curiosity. "Humans have always fascinated me. You cling to familiarity while embracing change, a contradiction that seems admirable." Kale laughed softly. "Well, we're full of contradictions, that's for sure. Take me, for example. I love learning about alien cultures, but I still trip over my own words whenever I meet someone new." "You are improving," Lyra said, her tone almost teasing. "Your attempts at humor, however, remain questionable." "Oh, come on," Kale protested, feigning offense. "My jokes are hilarious." Lyra's markings flickered briefly, hinting at amusement, perhaps to humans. Despite her playful jab, Kale couldn't help grinning. These moments, light-hearted exchanges mixed with deeper insights, were becoming some of his favorite parts of working with Lyra. They weren't just partners anymore. They were friends, learning from each other in ways neither had anticipated. Later that week, during a break between classes, Kale decided to introduce Lyra to another aspect of human culture: music. He led her to a quiet corner of the Academy's media library, where students often gathered to listen to recordings from across the galaxy. Rows of holographic displays lined the walls, each showcasing albums from different worlds. "This is Earth music," Kale explained, pulling up a playlist on one of the screens. "It's kind of hard to describe, but it's emotional, I guess. Some songs make you happy, others sad, and sometimes they just make you want to dance." Lyra tilted her head, observing the colorful visuals accompanying the music. "Interesting. On Silvera, sound is rarely used for expression. We rely more on light and vibration." Kale grinned. "Well, prepare to have your mind blown." He cooed up a classic rock song, letting the powerful guitar riffs fill the air. At first, Lyra seemed uncertain, her markings dimming slightly as she processed the unfamiliar sounds. But as the rhythm picked up, her expression shifted. Her markings began pulsing faintly, sensing with the beat. "Do you like it?" Kale asked eagerly. "It is intense," Lyra replied, her voice tinged with wonder. "The vibrations resonate differently than anything I have experienced before." Encouraged, Kale played several more tracks, ranging from upbeat pop to soulful ballads. Each elicited a unique reaction from Lyra, her markings shifting colors and patterns in response. By the end of the session, she looked contemplative. "Thank you," she said quietly. "This has given me much to consider." "No problem," Kale replied, smiling. "Music's universal, you know. Even if it doesn't mean the same thing to everyone, it still connects us." Lyra nodded slowly, as if absorbing the idea. Connection, yes. That is something worth exploring. Their bond continued to deepen as the days passed. One afternoon, while taking a break from their project, Kale invited Lyra to join him for lunch in the Academy cafeteria. Though initially hesitant, Silverans typically ate in solitude. She agreed, curious to observe human dining customs. The cafeteria buzzed with activity, students chatting animatedly as they filled their trays with food. Kale guided Lyra through the buffet line, explaining each dish and encouraging her to try small bites. While most items proved too strong or unusual for her palate, she found delight in a simple fruit salad, marveling at its sweetness. "How do humans create such flavors?" she asked, popping a slice of melon into her mouth. "We don't," Kale joked. "Nature does all the work. We're just lucky enough to enjoy it." Lyra smiled faintly, her markings glowing softly. "Your appreciation for simplicity is refreshing." After lunch, they strolled through the Academy gardens, discussing everything from Earth's weather patterns to silver and meditation techniques. Lyra taught Kel a breathing exercise designed to enhance focus, which he practiced diligently despite nearly falling asleep midway. In return, Kel shared stories about his family and childhood, painting vivid pictures of life on Earth. By the time they returned to the lab, Kale felt closer to Lyra than ever before. What had started as an awkward partnership had evolved into a genuine friendship, built on mutual respect and curiosity. They were two individuals from vastly different worlds, yet they had found common ground, not just in their project, but in their shared desire to learn and grow. As they prepared to leave for the day, Lyra turned to Kale and said, "Thank you for introducing me to your culture. It has been enlightening." "Same here," Kale replied earnestly. "I've learned so much from you too. Honestly, I think this whole experience has changed the way I see things." Lyra's markings shimmered faintly, reflecting contentment. Change is inevitable, especially in a place like this, but perhaps it is also welcome. With that, they parted ways, each carrying a renewed sense of purpose. For Kale, the Intergalactic Academy had become more than just a school. It was a place where connections transcended boundaries, where understanding bridged divides, and where friendships blossomed in the most unexpected ways. Little did he know, their journey together was far from over. Challenges lay ahead, testing the strength of their bond and pushing them to new heights. But for now, as Kale walked back to his dorm, he allowed himself a moment of quiet gratitude. For Lyra, for their partnership, and for the endless possibilities that awaited them in the future. The days of the Intergalactic Academy seemed to fly by as Kale and Lyra's friendship deepened. Their partnership on the prototype wristband had become a seamless collaboration, blending human creativity with silverin precision. But beyond their academic work, they were discovering new ways to connect, exploring each other's worlds, sharing stories, and finding common ground in their differences. One afternoon, after finishing another round of testing for their project, Kale suggested they take a break. "Hey Lyra," he said, stretching his arms above his head. "Have you ever tried Earth cooking? Like actually making something instead of just eating it?" Lyra tilted her head curiously. "Cooking is not a concept familiar to my people. We synthesize nutrients directly." "Well, that sounds efficient," Kale replied, grinning. "But trust me, there's something special about preparing food yourself. Want to give it a shot?" After a moment's hesitation, Lyra nodded. "Very well. I am curious." Kale led her to the Academy's communal kitchen, a spacious room filled with countertops, ovens, and shelves stocked with ingredients from across the galaxy. He rummaged through the cabinets until he found what he needed: flour, sugar, eggs, and chocolate chips. "We're going to make cookies," he announced proudly. "It's one of the simplest and tastiest recipes on Earth." Lyra watched intently as Kale explained each step, measuring out ingredients and mixing them together in a large bowl. When it came time to stir the batter, he handed her a wooden spoon. "Your turn," he said encouragingly. She took the spoon cautiously, her glowing markings dimming slightly as she focused. The texture of the dough felt strange against her fingers, but she followed Cal's instructions, stirring slowly until the mixture was smooth. Her markings brightened faintly when Cal praised her effort. "See, you're a natural," he teased, earning a small smile from her. Once the dough was ready, they scooped it onto baking trays and slid them into the oven. As the cookies baked, filling the air with a warm, sweet aroma, Kale leaned back against the counter, watching Lyra's reaction. Her eyes widened slightly as the scent grew stronger, and her markings shifted to a soft purple hue. "This smell," she murmured. "It is pleasant." "Told you," Kale said, chuckling. "Just wait till you taste them." When the cookies were finally done, golden brown and perfectly crisp around the edges, Kale placed one on a plate and handed it to Lyra. She studied it carefully before taking a tiny bite. For a moment, she froze, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, her markings began to glow brighter. "It is delightful," she admitted, sounding genuinely surprised. "The combination of flavors is unexpected yet harmonious." Kale beamed. "Welcome to the magic of Earth desserts. And hey, now you can say you've officially cooked something." Lyra nodded, a hint of pride flickering in her luminous eyes. "Thank you for teaching me this. It is enriching." Their shared experiences weren't limited to Earth traditions. In return, Lyra introduced Kale to aspects of Silveran culture, including meditation techniques designed to enhance focus and clarity. One evening, as they sat cross-legged on the floor of an empty classroom, Lyra guided him through a series of breathing exercises. "Close your eyes," she instructed softly. "Focus on the rhythm of your breath. Imagine it flowing like light, calming your mind." Kale obeyed, though he struggled to quiet his thoughts. After several minutes, he opened one eye and glanced at Lyra, who sat perfectly still, her markings glowing steadily. "How do you stay so focused?" he asked, exasperated. "Practice," she replied simply. "And patience. Meditation is not about achieving perfection, but about creating balance." Determined to succeed, Kale closed his eyes again and tried to follow her guidance. To his surprise, he eventually felt a sense of calm wash over him, as if the chaos of the day had melted away. When he opened his eyes, Lyra was watching him with a faint smile. "You did well," she said approvingly. "For a beginner." "Thanks," Kale muttered, rolling his eyes playfully. "I'll take that as a compliment." As their bond strengthened, Kale and Lyra began spending more time together outside of class and lab sessions. They explored the Academy's sprawling campus, venturing into areas neither had visited before. One weekend, they stumbled upon a hidden garden tucked behind the science building, a quiet oasis filled with alien plants that shimmered under the sunlight. "This place is amazing," Kale whispered, running his fingers along the velvety leaves of a nearby shrub. "I didn't even know it existed. It resembles parts of Silvera," Lyra said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "The flora there glows similarly, though the colors are more vibrant." They spent hours wandering through the garden, marveling at its beauty. At one point, Kale noticed Lyra standing near a cluster of bioluminescent flowers, her markings sensing with their gentle glow. She looked peaceful, almost ethereal, and Kale couldn't help feeling a pang of admiration. "You belong here," he said softly, startling her out of her reverie. "What do you mean?" she asked, turning to face him. "I mean," Kale hesitated, searching for the right words. "You fit perfectly in moments like this, like you're connected to everything around you." Lyra's markings dimmed slightly, betraying a rare moment of vulnerability. "Sometimes, I wonder if I belong anywhere. My world is so different from yours, and yet, being here feels right." Kale smiled warmly. "Maybe belonging isn't about fitting into one specific place. Maybe it's about finding people who make every place feel like home." Her markings pulsed faintly, reflecting gratitude. "You have a way of expressing complex ideas simply." "That's because I'm a genius," Kale joked, earning a laugh from her. Their growing friendship wasn't without challenges, however. Despite their efforts to understand each other, cultural misunderstandings still arose. During one particularly tense exchange, Kale accidentally offended Lyra by referring to her telepathic abilities as mind reading. Though she didn't show outward signs of anger, her markings flared red, a clear indication of distress. "I'm sorry," Kale said quickly, realizing his mistake. "I didn't mean it like that. On Earth, we used phrases like mind-reading casually, but I know it's disrespectful to your culture. Lyra took a deep breath, her markings gradually returning to their usual glow. I understand. Words carry weight, especially when describing abilities tied to identity. But I appreciate your apology. From that moment on, Kale made a conscious effort to be more mindful of his language, while Lyra worked to explain silver and customs in ways he could relate to. These moments of reflection only strengthened their connection, reminding them that true understanding required patience and empathy. As weeks turned into months, Kale and Lyra became inseparable. Their classmates often teased them about their partnership, joking that they were the most unlikely duo in the academy. But Kale and Lyra didn't mind. They knew their bond was built on mutual respect and genuine curiosity. One evening, as they sat side by side in the academy's observatory, gazing up at the stars, Kale turned to Lyra and said, "Do you ever think about what happens after graduation? Like, where you'll go next?" Lyra considered his question thoughtfully. "I will return to Silvera eventually. There is much I wish to share with my people about humanity, and much I hope to learn from them." "And what about us?" Kale asked hesitantly. "Will we keep in touch?" Lyra's markings shimmered faintly, reflecting warmth. Distance does not dictate connection. If anything, our experiences here have shown me that bonds transcend boundaries. Kale smiled, feeling a surge of hope. "Then promise me something. Promise we'll stay friends, no matter what." "I promise," Lyra replied, her voice steady and sincere. In that moment, surrounded by the vastness of space and the glow of distant stars, Kale realized how much Lyra had changed his perspective, not just on aliens or cultures, but on life itself. Together, they had bridged gaps, broken barriers, and forged a friendship that defied expectations. Little did they know, their journey was far from over. Challenges lay ahead, testing the strength of their bond and pushing them to new heights. But for now, as they sat beneath the endless expanse of the universe, Kale allowed himself a moment of quiet gratitude. For Lyra, for their partnership, and for the infinite possibilities that awaited them in the future. The Intergalactic Academy had always been a hub of innovation and discovery, but even the most advanced institutions weren't immune to accidents. One fateful afternoon, disaster struck during an experiment in the science lab. A malfunctioning containment field caused unstable energy particles to escape into the air, threatening everyone within the building. Alarms blared throughout the campus, their piercing wails echoing off the glass domes and metallic walls. Students scrambled for safety, panic spreading like wildfire as emergency protocols activated. Red warning lights flashed overhead, casting eerie shadows across the corridors. In the chaos, Kale and Lyra found themselves separated from the crowd, having stayed behind in the lab to finish some last-minute adjustments on their prototype wristband. Kale glanced at Lyra, his heart pounding. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. Lyra's glowing markings flared red, signaling alarm. "The containment breach has released volatile particles. If they spread unchecked, it could destabilize the entire structure. Then we can't just leave," Kale said firmly, gripping the edge of the table. "We've got tools here. Our project might be able to help stabilize things." Lyra hesitated, her markings flickering between red and green as she processed his suggestion. "It is dangerous. These particles are unpredictable. So is running out there without knowing what's going on," Kale countered. "If we can use the wristband to detect shifts in the energy field, maybe we can contain it before it spreads further." For a moment, Lyra studied him, her luminous eyes reflecting both concern and determination. Finally, she nodded. "Very well, but we must act quickly." Working together with practiced efficiency, Kale and Lyra sprang into action. They powered up the prototype wristband, calibrating its sensors to track the unstable particles flooding the lab. The device hummed softly as data streamed across its interface, highlighting areas of high concentration. Lyra used her telepathic abilities to coordinate their efforts silently, relaying instructions directly to Cal's mind. Focus on the eastern quadrant first, she projected, her voice calm yet urgent in his thoughts. The particles are denser there. Cal nodded, adjusting the settings on the wristband accordingly. Got it. What about the western side? I will handle that, Lyra replied, raising her hands. With a graceful motion, she summoned her telekinetic powers, forming a shimmering barrier around the worst affected area. The glowing shield pulsed faintly, containing the rogue particles and preventing them from spreading further. Despite her efforts, however, the situation remained precarious. The energy particles were erratic, surging unpredictably despite their attempts to stabilize them. Sweat dripped down Cal's forehead as he worked frantically, recalibrating the wristband's algorithms to adapt to the changing conditions. We're close, he muttered through gritted teeth. Just a little more. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the room as part of the ceiling collapsed, sending debris raining down. Cal instinctively threw himself forward, shielding Lyra from falling rubble. Dust filled the air, choking and disorienting them momentarily. Are you hurt? Cal asked, coughing as he pushed himself upright. No, Lyra replied, though her markings dimmed slightly, betraying strain. But we cannot maintain this indefinitely. The particles are too volatile. Cal scanned the holoscreen attached to the wristband, his mind racing. Then inspiration struck. The cooling system, he exclaimed. If we redirect the coolant flow, we might be able to neutralize the particles. It is risky, Lyra warned. The system was not designed for such a task. It's our best shot, Cal insisted. Trust me. Without waiting for her response, he dashed toward the control panel near the far wall, dodging falling debris and sparks along the way. His fingers flew over the buttons, rerouting coolant lines to flood the affected areas. Meanwhile, Lyra reinforced her telekinetic barriers, holding the particles at bay until the coolant took effect. Seconds felt like hours as they worked against time. Finally, a hissing sound filled the room as jets of icy vapor erupted from the vents, enveloping the unstable particles. Slowly but surely, the chaotic energy began to dissipate, the threat diminishing with each passing moment. When the danger finally passed, Cal slumped against the wall, exhausted but triumphant. Lyra joined him moments later, her markings glowing steadily once more. For several seconds, neither spoke. They simply sat there, catching their breath and processing what had just happened. You saved us, Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence. We saved us, Cal corrected, offering a weary smile. Couldn't have done it without your telekinesis. Lyra tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. Humans often underestimate themselves. You possess courage and ingenuity beyond measure. Well, I had a pretty good teacher, Cal replied, nudging her playfully. Besides, teamwork makes the dream work, right? Lyra's markings brightened faintly, hinting at amusement. An interesting phrase, though I suspect it originates from Earth sports. Probably, Cal admitted with a laugh. Still applies, though. News of their heroics spread quickly across the academy. Professors and students alike praised Cal and Lyra for their quick thinking and bravery. During an assembly held the following day, Dean Torin, a towering alien with iridescent scales, publicly commended them for averting what could have been a catastrophic disaster. Your actions exemplify the very essence of this academy, the dean declared, his resonant voice filling the auditorium. By combining knowledge, skill, and cooperation, you demonstrated that unity transcends species and culture. As applause erupted around them, Cal glanced at Lyra, who stood beside him on stage. Her markings glowed softly, reflecting pride and humility. He felt a swell of gratitude, not just for her partnership, but for everything they'd overcome together. Later, as they walked back to their dorms, Cal couldn't resist teasing her. So, guess we're officially heroes now. Lyra raised an eyebrow. I would not go that far. We simply did what was necessary. Modest as always, Cal teased. Still, I think we earned ourselves a break. Want to grab some snacks and celebrate? Lyra considered his offer and nodded. Very well, but only if you promise not to make me eat chocolate again. Deal, Kale laughed. How about something less polarizing? Like fruit juice. That sounds acceptable, Lyra replied, her markings shifting to a warm green hue. Their shared victory brought them even closer, solidifying their bond in ways neither had anticipated. Over the next few days, they reflected on the incident, discussing how their combined strengths had made all the difference. Kale marveled at Lyra's composure under pressure, while Lyra admired his resourcefulness and determination. One evening, as they sat together in the academy gardens, Lyra turned to Kale and said, "This experience has taught me something important." "What's that?" Kale asked curiously. "That differences are not weaknesses," Lyra explained. "They are opportunities to learn, to grow, and to create something greater than either party could achieve alone." Kale smiled, feeling a surge of pride. "Sounds like something a true diplomat would say." "Perhaps," Lyra replied, her markings shimmering faintly. "Though I suspect it is also something a friend would say." "A friend, ha," Kale repeated, grinning. "I'll take that as a compliment." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the garden and the glow of light, Kale realized how much Lyra had come to mean to him. She wasn't just a partner or a classmate. She was someone who challenged him, inspired him, and believed in him when he doubted himself. Little did they know, their journey was far from over. Graduation loomed on the horizon, bringing with it bittersweet farewells and uncertain futures. But for now, as they sat beneath the stars, Kale allowed himself a moment of quiet contentment, for Lyra, for their friendship, and for the endless possibilities that lay ahead. As graduation approached, the Intergalactic Academy buzzed with excitement and nostalgia. Students prepared for their final presentations, packed up their belongings, and said heartfelt goodbyes to friends they'd made over the years. For Kale and Lyra, however, this milestone carried a mix of emotions: pride in their accomplishments, gratitude for their shared experiences, and uncertainty about what lay ahead. Their prototype wristband had become one of the most celebrated projects at the Academy, earning praise not only from professors, but also from visiting dignitaries representing various alien species. During the showcase event, Kale and Lyra stood side by side, as attendees marveled at the device's ability to translate nonverbal cues across cultures. The glowing blue liquid that had once spilled disastrously during their first meeting now pulsed rhythmically within the sleek wristband, symbolizing their journey from awkward beginnings to seamless collaboration. "This is incredible," Professor Varn remarked as he examined the device. "You two have truly bridged worlds." "Couldn't have done it without each other," Kale replied, glancing at Lyra with a smile. Lyra nodded, her markings glowing softly. "Our differences strengthened our work. Without them, this would not exist." The professor chuckled warmly. "A lesson many could learn from you both. Perhaps someday your invention will unite even more species." Kale felt a surge of pride at the thought. What had started as a simple class project had grown into something far greater, a tool that could foster understanding in an increasingly interconnected universe. After the showcase, Kale and Lyra found themselves sitting together in their favorite spot, the hidden garden tucked behind the science building. The bioluminescent flowers shimmered under the fading sunlight, casting a soft glow around them. It was here that they often came to reflect on their progress and share quiet moments away from the chaos of campus life. "So," Kale began hesitantly, breaking the comfortable silence, "what happens next for you?" Lyra tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "I must return to Silvera. My people need to understand humanity better, and I believe I can help bridge that gap." "That's amazing," Kale said sincerely. "They're lucky to have someone like you." "And Earth?" Lyra asked gently. "What will you do?" Kale shrugged, running a hand through his unruly hair. "I'm thinking of applying to the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. If I can use skinobiology to help humans connect with other species, maybe I can make a difference. Lyra's markings brightened faintly, reflecting approval. You would excel in such a role. Your curiosity and empathy are rare qualities. Thanks, Kale murmured, smiling shyly. But I'll miss working with you. Who's going to keep me grounded when I get too excited about alien plants? Lyra chuckled softly. Perhaps you will find another partner, though I doubt anyone will tolerate your enthusiasm quite as well. Kale laughed, though there was a hint of sadness in his voice. Probably not. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of their impending separation hung between them, unspoken yet undeniable. They had come so far together, navigating cultural differences, overcoming misunderstandings, and facing challenges that tested their bond. Now, as their paths diverged, they couldn't help but wonder if their friendship would endure the distance. Sensing his unease, Lyra reached out and placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was cool but comforting, grounding him in the present. Distance does not dictate connection, she reminded him, echoing words she'd spoken months ago. We have built something enduring. That will not fade easily. Kale nodded, feeling a lump rise in his throat. Still, promise me we'll stay in touch, even if it's just sending messages every now and then. I promise, Lyra replied, her voice steady. And perhaps, one day, you will visit Silvera. The idea lit a spark of hope in Cal's chest. Really, you'd let me see your world? It would be an honor, Lyra said, her markings glowing warmly. Your perspective might inspire my people as much as mine has inspired you. Grinning, Kale leaned back against the bench, imagining what it would be like to step foot on Silvera, to walk beneath its glowing skies and witness the harmony Lyra often described. Deal. But only if you promise to teach me more meditation techniques. I still haven't mastered that breathing thing. Lyra smiled faintly. Practice makes perfect. On the eve of graduation, Lyra surprised Kel with a gift, a small crystal pendant infused with her bioluminescent essence. When activated, it emitted a soft, pulsing light reminiscent of her markings. This is part of me, she explained as she handed it to them. A reminder of our friendship and the bond we share. Kale held the pendant reverently, marveling at its beauty. It's incredible. Thank you, Lyra. I'll treasure it always. In return, Kale gave her a handwritten journal filled with notes, sketches, and reflections from their time together. Something to remember Earth by, he said, his voice tinged with emotion. And maybe some tips on how to survive human cooking experiments. Lyra accepted the gift graciously, her markings shimmering brightly. It is perfect. Thank you. The following morning, the academy grounds were alive with activity as students gathered for the graduation ceremony. Dressed in formal attire adorned with symbols representing their respective planets, they stood proudly before family members, mentors, and peers. As names were called and diplomas awarded, Kale searched the crowd until he spotted Lyra. She looked radiant, her silver skin catching the sunlight as she stepped forward to receive her certificate. When the ceremony concluded, Kale approached her, wearing a wide grin. Congratulations, graduate. Thank you, Lyra replied, returning his smile. To us both. Together, they walked toward the edge of campus, where ships awaited to carry departing students home. As they reached Lyra's vessel, she turned to face Kel one last time. Farewell, Kale. Until we meet again. Farewell, Lyra, Kale said, his voice thick with emotion. Take care of yourself, and don't forget to write. I will not, Lyra promised, her markings glowing steadily. With a final nod, she boarded the ship, disappearing inside as the hatch closed behind her. Kale watched as the vessel ascended into the sky, leaving a trail of light in its wake. Though part of him felt a pang of loss, he couldn't suppress the hope swelling in his heart. Their friendship had transcended boundaries, defied expectations, and created memories he would cherish forever. As he turned to head back to his dorm, Kale fingered the crystal pendant hanging around his neck. Its gentle glow reassured him that no matter how far apart they were, their bond remained unbroken. Someday, he would visit Silvera, and until then, he carried a piece of Lyra with him wherever he went. Little did Cale know, his journey was just beginning. The lessons he'd learned alongside Lyra, the importance of connection, empathy, and understanding, would guide him as he ventured into the vast, interconnected universe. And though their paths might take them to different corners of the galaxy, their shared dream of unity would continue to shine brightly, lighting the way for others to follow.